You ever look at history and just wonder, how? How do these massive empires, the Romans, the Mayans, the Ottomans, dominate the world for centuries and then just fall apart? And then, out of nowhere, new ones rise up to take their place. It feels like one of history's biggest mysteries.
But what if it isn't a mystery at all? What if there's actually a code, a set of rules that governs the rise and fall of societies? That's really the question we're digging into here. Is our destiny as a people already locked in, or do we actually hold the pen?
All right, so let's jump right in. If we're going to try to decode the future of nations, we've got to first look back at how we've tried to explain their past.
For most of human history, the answer was pretty simple. We're not really in charge. Whether it was floods, plagues, famines, invasions, people figured their fate was in the hands of the gods, or the stars, or some other powerful unseen force. We were just characters in a story that someone else was writing.
Okay, so then things started to shift. As we moved into the age of science, we started looking for a different kind of answer, something a bit more tangible to help us decode history.
And one of the most influential modern ideas is something called historical materialism, which is probably most famously linked with Karl Marx. The core idea here is that history isn't driven by gods or fate, but by economics.
So in this model, you can think of history as this giant engine. And what fuels it? The constant struggle between the rich and the poor, the owners and the workers. It's a really powerful idea, but notice something? It's still a kind of determinism, right? Human choice, morality, all of that takes a back seat. The economic machine just keeps chugging along on its own.
But what if both of these views, the divine fate one and the economic one, are kind of missing the point? What if there are rules to history, but they just work in a totally different way than we think? This is where a really fascinating third option comes into play, from thinkers like Ibn Khaldun and much later, Ayatollah al-Sadr.
So way back in the 14th century, we're talking centuries before modern sociology was even a thing, the incredible thinker Ibn Khaldun said, hey, history isn't random. He argued that societies actually follow predictable patterns and laws. He was one of the first to say we could study history like a science. But, and this is the really crucial part, he realized that the laws that govern people aren't as rigid as the laws of nature.
And this right here is the key difference. A law of physics, like gravity, is totally unconditional. If I drop my pen, it's gonna fall. It happens every single time, no exceptions. But the laws of history, they're conditional. They're different for one huge reason. They involve us, human beings, and our choices.
And this brings us right to the heart of this entire explainer. Let's break down exactly how this works. So, the laws of history aren't about what will happen. They're about what will happen if we do certain things. It's like a giant cosmic if-then statement. If a society chooses justice and fairness, then it will prosper. If a society gives in to corruption and doesn't care, then it will start to decay, you see? The law itself is always there, but it's our collective actions that pull the trigger.
This verse from the Quran is absolutely central to this whole way of thinking. Look at what it's saying. It directly connects a society's external reality, its condition, to its internal state. This just flips the old ideas of determinism completely on their head. The point is, change isn't something that just happens to us. The trigger for historical change, for good or for bad, is the collective mind, the morality, the will of the people themselves.
And here we go. This is that if-then principle in action, perfectly laid out. It's a direct cause and effect relationship. The if is the internal change. Believe and practice piety. The then is the external result, blessings and prosperity. So from this point of view, a nation's destiny isn't some random roll of the dice. It's a direct consequence of its character.
So that leads to a pretty important question, right? If our collective inner state is what drives everything, then what shapes that inner state? Well, according to Ayatollah al-Sadr, it all comes down to the ideal a society decides to chase after.
And he breaks it down into three types. First, you've got a traditional ideal. That's all about looking backward, just trying to copy what your ancestors did. That path usually ends in stagnation. Then there's a relative ideal. This is any limited material goal, like, say, becoming the richest country or achieving some political system. These things can be powerful motivators, for sure, but there's a built-in danger. What happens after you get there? And last, you have an absolute ideal. This is something transcendent, limitless, like God, which allows for infinite growth and progress.
This is such a powerful metaphor, and it perfectly describes what happens to a society that chases a relative material ideal. It's like chasing a mirage in the desert. You could spend generations pushing towards this one finite goal, but when you finally get there, you find it's empty. There's nothing really there to quench that deeper thirst, and so the whole society loses its drive, its purpose.
And for anyone who's interested in digging into this even more, these profound ideas are all laid out in scholarly works like this one. So this isn't just some surface-level philosophy. It's a really detailed analysis of what these thinkers believe are the core laws of civilization, all drawn from Scripture.
So, after exploring all these different views, where does that leave us? What's the final takeaway? What is the code of history?
Well, the verdict seems to be this: our world is a mirror. The prosperity and justice we see, or the chaos and decay we see around us, it's not random. It's a direct reflection of our collective inner state, the choices we all make, and the ideals we choose to chase. In the end, our destiny isn't written for us, it's written by us.
And that leaves us with one last, pretty challenging question to think about. If all this is true, if the outside world is just a mirror of what's inside, then what does the state of our world today say about us? What's the ideal that we're all collectively chasing, and is that ideal leading us towards an oasis or just another mirage?